Do you struggle to understand jazz harmony? Well, if you do, you are not alone. You see, most students struggle to understand how you can take a melody like this and turn it into this. And the reason students struggle with this is that they don't understand that jazz harmony is a building process. And in order to take this simple melody and get it to this higher level, you really need to walk through 4 levels of harmony. So today I'm going to teach you exactly how to do this. We're going to talk about chord function, we're going to talk about chord color, we're going to talk about chord voicing, and then we're going to talk about passing chords. All right, let's dive into the first step here. The first step is just learn this little melody. It's a very simple melody. It goes like this. Okay, it's basically C, B, C, E, D, B. Okay, very, very simple. Learn your melody, and once you have the melody down, let's go ahead and talk about the very first step in, turning this into a beautiful jazz arrangement. And the very first step is to look at adding some chords to this, all right? Now, if you're starting this melody on a C like this, then you'd probably want to use some type of C chord because we're in the key of C, and this melody uses notes from the C scale, okay? A great first chord to start on is called a C major chord or C6 chord. It's basically a C major triad, and we're adding a 6th to it. The 6th comes from the C major scale, okay? You could also play a major 7 like this, okay? Now, whenever you're playing a song in a key like the key of C, we have what are called diatonic 7th chords. They're basically 7th chords that come from the scale. All right, this is a C major scale, all white notes. And so if you play a diatonic 7th chord on each scale degree, you get a D minor 7, you get an E minor 7, an F major 7, a G7, an A7, and a B7, okay? So go through your diatonic 7th chords, make sure you can play these chords. And by the way, we have a really good course on diatonic 7th chords over at pianowithjohnny.com. You can practice them in all 12 keys with exercises. But there's a really important principle in music where chords lead by a 5-1 relationship, okay? So if I wanted to get to this C6 chord, the best way to get here is by going up a 5th, C, D, E, F, G, that's 5 notes, and play a diatonic chord on my G. Okay, this is called a G dominant 7. Okay, so if we start on a C6 chord, if I play this progression, and I want to repeat it, a great chord to go to is my G7. Does that make sense? Okay, and therefore we put a G7 at the end of this chord progression because that leads us back to the C6 chord. Okay, does that make sense? Now, if we follow this logic, well, a G7 leads to a C. G is a 5th up from C. Well, what's a 5th up from G? Well, a 5th up from G is a D chord, okay? So in front of that G7 chord, we can put a D diatonic chord, a D minor 7. Okay, does that make sense? That's a 5th above G. So we're going to put it down here just for now. And now we've got this. Sounds pretty nice, okay? And this becomes a 2-5-1 chord progression. In the key of C, this is a 2 chord, this is a 5 chord, and then this is a 1 chord. This is one of the most important progressions in jazz music. We have a ton of really good courses on your 2-5-1 chord progression. You can check that out in our jazz learning track. Okay, if we follow this logic one more step, what's a chord we can add in front of the D chord? It's an A chord, okay? A minor 7. This is a diatonic 7th chord. It's a 5th up from D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that leads us to the D. Now, if we put all this together, C6, A minor 7, that's our 6th chord, D is our 2 chord, and then G7 is our 5 chord, okay? And so what we just constructed here is what's called a turnaround progression or rhythm changes. It's a 1 chord, a 6 chord, a 2 chord, and the 5 chord. And the reason this chord progression is so effective is because of this 5-1 relationship where you can basically build back from the C chord using the 5th of that chord. Okay? So this is the topic of chord function. Now, if you want to learn more about chord function, we've got a really good course on this called Analyzing a Jazz Standard, where we walk through the jazz harmony and really help make sense of this. So this is level 1. You got to understand diatonic chords. You got to understand how chords move from one to the other. Okay, let's go to the next step. The next step is chord color, okay? So we've got our basic chords with a turnaround progression. Well, let's make these chords a little more interesting, okay? So what jazz musicians will do is they'll take a chord like the C6 and they'll add the ninth. The ninth is the D, okay? And the way you find the ninth is you can build from C. You're building up in thirds, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. And the D is the 9. It's also a whole step up from the C, okay? So we're gonna add the 9 to this chord. On the A minor chord, it's very common to add the 9 and the 11, okay? 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, okay? It's very, very common on minor chords. We're also gonna do this on our D minor chord. We're gonna add the 9 and the 11. And we have the notation. By the way, this lesson sheet music you're seeing up here on the top left of your screen is downloadable and printable over at pianowithjonny.com, and you can actually change the key with the click of one button. So you can check that out. I'll put a link to that below. Okay, D minor 11, and our final chord, G7. Okay, it's very common on a dominant 7th chord like this to add your 9, your A, and your 13, which is your E, okay? And this can be kind of tricky for beginner jazz students to see, but basically it's a 6th interval above the G, the root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's an E. In jazz, we call it the 13 because we build chords in thirds, okay? So this is level 2. Once you have your chord function, then you want to add some color to it. So we add the 9 on the C6. We add the 9 and 11 on your A minor 7. You add your 9 and 11 on your D minor 7, and you add your 9 and your 13 on your G7 chord, okay? So that's level 2 chord color. If you want to learn more about how to color your chords, we've got a bunch of courses on this topic over at Piano with Jonny. Okay, level 3 is chord voicing, okay? And basically, once you have the color, then how do you arrange or how do you distribute the notes of your chord to where it sounds really nice, okay? And this is the topic of chord voicing. It's how we spread the notes out on the piano to make it sound really beautiful, okay? So first chord C6-9, check it out, guys. We're gonna do like that. It's a C6-9 chord, but we're spreading the chord out in primarily 4th intervals. This is called a quartal voicing or a quarter. It's built in fourths. Okay, you can learn more about quartal voicings over at Piano with Jonny. Okay, so we have the root, the 3rd, the 6th, the 9, the 5th, and the root. Okay, so here we go. Let's play the whole melody now with these more beautiful voicings. This is a really lovely A minor 11 chord. Root 7, 3rd. We've got the 11 here butted up on the bottom, the 7 and the 9, okay? We're spreading these chords out. You got a little cluster there. You can learn more about chord clusters in our courses, okay? Beautiful A minor 7 chord. We're just gonna come up here and grab what's called a rootless voicing in our left hand. 7, 9, 3, and 5, and then the 7 and the 3rd, okay? This is another quartal voicing on our D minor 7. I've got the root, the 11, the 7, the 3rd, the 11, the 7, and the 9. Okay? And then we're going to come up here to another quartal voicing. 11, 7, 3, 5, 1. And then this beautiful G13 chord, another cluster voicing. Root 7, we've got the 9 and the 3rd, the 13, and the 3rd on the top. Okay? So this is the topic of chord voicing. Again, it's how do we take those beautiful colors and spread them out. And there's a number of techniques you can use, like quartals, you can use drop 2s, you can use block chords, you can use rootless voicings. And again, you can do a deep dive on all these topics over at Piano with Jonny. Now let's go ahead and play with the backing track. This lesson does come with a backing track, and here it is. Here we go. Oh, that sounds so beautiful. By the way, this backing track is downloadable in the PWJ membership. I'll put a link to that below. Now, we've talked about the chord function, we've talked about adding color to the chord, and we've talked about the chord voicing, which is how we distribute the notes of the chord. Well, what's the next level? And the final level, when I'm playing jazz tunes, is the topic of passing chords. And basically, in between each of these chords, I can throw in some other chords. Okay, So how do you add passing chords to an arrangement? Well, there is a very, very cool technique that jazz musicians use all the time called tritone substitution, okay? And it's a very simple idea. Basically, if I look at my first chord, C6, and I want to get to my A minor 7 chord, well, one of the coolest ways and the easiest ways to do this is by using the dominant 7th chord up a half step from my target chord. Okay, so I can, before this A minor 7, I can put a B flat dominant 7 and get to this A minor 7 chord. Okay, so try this with me. Okay, C6 for my first chord, B flat 7, and then my A minor 7. Okay. And the reason this is an effective device, the way tritone substitution works, is that this B flat 7 chord is a substitute chord for an E7 chord, which is the 5 chord of A minor. Okay, an E7 leads to an A minor because it is the secondary dominant chord. Okay, this is another really important principle that you need to understand. Again, you can learn more about this over at Piano with Jonny. Okay, so this B flat is a substitute, and so I can get to all my chords using this basically dominant 7th chord built a half step above the target chord. Okay, so before my D minor 7 chord, I can use an E flat dominant 7, and then D minor 7, I want to get to G7, I can use the A flat 7 above that and then go to my G7. Okay, so that's the topic of passing chords. You can learn a lot more about passing chords in our passing chords and reharmonization course over at Piano with Jonny. But let's go ahead and use this idea now and to basically fill in the melody. Okay, first chord, passing chord. We're going to use a B flat 7. We're going to put the 9 and the 13 in here to really color it. Here's my A minor 11, E flat, okay, it's an E flat 7 chord. I've got my 9 and my 13. Remember, we like to color dominant chords with 9s and 13s. D minor 11, okay, same chord as before, A flat 7. This is a really beautiful chord. I've got my basic notes of my A flat 7, I've got the 13, I've got the 9, okay, we talked about that. And this D melody note is actually the sharp 11. Okay, it's really, really lovely. If you want to learn more about chord extensions and alterations, this sharp 11 is called an alteration. You can learn more about this at Piano with Jonny. And then finally, G13, we're going to do a little movement here after this G13 chord, and we're going to use the flat 13 to sort of color it and add a note there. Okay? So once again, how do you add passing chords? Well, you can take whatever your target chord is, like an A minor 7, and use the dominant 7th chord built on the note 1/2 step up. Okay? And when you put this together, it sounds really cool. Check it out. All right, thanks for watching this quick tip, and if you enjoyed this lesson, I want to encourage you to check out pianowithjonny.com. We have over 700 step-by-step lessons in jazz, cocktail jazz, jazz swing, Latin jazz, blues, theory, technique, improvisation. It is the full learning platform for all playing levels. Also, be sure to check out the membership at Piano with Jonny. This gives you unlimited access to our entire course library. Plus, you get to be part of our live monthly events, including our live Q&As, our live workshop lessons. You get to be part of our student assessments where you can send me a video and I'll give you personalized feedback. We do weekly challenges for our members and we have a ton of fun. So go check out Piano with Jonny and I'll see you in the next lesson.